Welcome, Julia. We're so happy to have you here at ERA. What was your motivation to work in the field of EU law training?
Tänan, Jenny. I suppose it's the first time that somebody from Estonia is working at ERA. My country of origin was the last member state to join ERA in 2018. My father always told me that the best investment for the future is education and continuous training. And he knew what he was talking about, because he was a psychiatrist and a writer, but he could not do what was his passion, the psychoanalysis, or publish magazines about contemporary theatre review, because he could do it only quasi underground. It was a closed system. It was not possible to travel. There was no freedom of opinion. And well, nowadays during the pandemic, we also see what it means, like if we cannot travel freely, but at least we can express our opinions freely, and we can meet our friends and people from other states online. And my mother even didn't start writing. She's also a writer before the collapse of the Soviet Union. And after that, she thought now she can freely express her views, and she doesn't need to write between the lines. So yes, education, continuous training. And I think this is something that it belongs to you. It doesn't matter what are the political systems or whether there are pandemic or economic crisis or whatever. Nobody can take away from you what you have learned, what you have acquired, your skills, your knowledges, your expertise. And I think that these expert legal professionals, they are the true cornerstone of democracy and rule of law in Europe. And this is the mission of ERA. And unfortunately, even nowadays, although there is no longer the Soviet Union and this kind of system, but there are our own systems. And unfortunately, it's frightening that these systems that we have chosen freely still can sometimes be of danger to the rule of law and democracy and independent professionals. So therefore, what ERA is doing is extremely important, and I'm very honored to be part of this team. And it's not at all complicated, because the people working here are true professionals and are all very, very nice.
So you've been with us now for a couple of months. What have your impressions of ERA been so far?
Well, the first time I was at ERA was actually in 2004. And I was a young Supreme Court judge at the time. There was a seminar on preliminary references to the European Court, to the Court of Justice of the European Union for administrative law judges. And I participated at this seminar. I was very happy because it's one of my favorite topics. I wrote my LLM thesis on this topic, and later on my doctoral thesis on concurring and dissenting opinion of judges. And we had excellent high-quality speakers. All the lawyers and assistants worked at ERA were really very, very competent and professional. And I remember I was very impressed by the library of ERA already at that time. And we had, of course, nice lunch breaks, coffee breaks. It was very comfortable to the hotel that was close to this building. And we also, what I very much appreciated, were the networking possibilities with colleagues from all around Europe. And with some of the colleagues I still have contacts. They have become very successful in their respective countries, at the Supreme Courts. And then I also took some time to walk around in one of the oldest cities of Germany. I was walking around the banks of Mosel River, and then I went to see the Karl Marx birthplace, and Porta Nigra, of course, admired it. And I ended up at the Weihnachtsmarkt, Christmas market. It was, I think, end of November. And I bought from here how is it called, this Weihnachtspyramide, it's in German. I used to have one, but a smaller one when I was a child, from some friends who visited us from East Germany, but it unfortunately broke, and I decided to buy another one from Trier. And now every Christmas, I think of Trier, at least every Christmas, because it's a lot of joy for me and for my family and my children. And funnily enough, I never was in Trier as a speaker, although I've been speaking many times, hundreds of times, in many different places about European law and human rights. But I suppose I didn't have time in schedule or whatever reasons. But I'm happy to be back now. And now my impression is, and it is very peculiar because I have seen how this house was full of life. And now I suddenly feel like I have entered in the castle of a sleeping beauty, which is waiting for a prince to come and wake up this era from the online mood. You could say that we are in a different era with a small e, and it is very very sad at the one time, but I'm still optimistically impressed by the people, as I said, who work at the ERA. And I think another guideline in my life, next to the investment to the education, has always been people. And when I was a judge at the European Court of Human Rights, my 2 minutes eldest of my twins sons, he was then maybe about 5 years old, he said to me, "Mother, you're going to your work at the European Court of Human Rights, so don't forget that the most important are human beings, people." And indeed, and I started with meeting all the people in my department, the lawyers, the assistants, the trainees, the HIVIs, and I continue also, of course, with other department people that we have close cooperation at it. And I think that everybody at ERA should participate in one of the ERA's events to see how it really works like. And I think that this gave me so much motivation and inspiration. And the second thing, parallel to that, my first impressions are, or what I would like to do, is to visit the target group of ERA. So to see that this, above all, these national judicial institutes, but also other legal professional institutions, and to see what are their expectations and what are their experiences with ERA. And of course, at the same time, parallel to that, doing brainstorming about new programs and projects and EU calls, and to see this general picture of where we are at the moment. But my first impressions are very positive, and I have the feeling that every time I'm coming up with to suggest something, or that I feel that this could be perhaps improved or done differently, I see that it has either already been done or there have been already reflections on how to do that. So this is really impressive.
So you have had a long and extensive career. What has been your highlight so far?
I'm now hesitating. I'm hesitating between Honey in Edward Albee's Virginia Woolf, which we played with the amateur theatre or amateur drama society called Tagora at the Council of Europe, staged by Martin Simmons at the black box called Cube Noir. Or the second one, perhaps the play written by my mother, where I had a role called I, and it was the play was named To Europe, and we performed it with the Wilde Amateur Theatre in Tartu, Estonia, at the former psychiatric clinic. And it was staged by a professional actor, Raivo Adlas. So this, yes. But of course, I also like singing very much, and one of the dreams that I realized in 2014 was to sing as a part of the European Choir of Estonians at the Estonian Song Festival that we have every 5 years on an open air, on a big arena next to the Baltic Sea, with another 25,000 singers, 400,000 participants. But okay, but seriously, when I come back to the law part, it's of course the European Court of Human Rights, the possibility and the honor and the privilege to be a judge at the European Court of Human Rights, and before that at the Supreme Court in Estonia. And I have been lucky, and this is also one motivation to join ERA, to have these two possibilities to combine academic and research work, and as a professor of European law, I'm currently visiting professor of European law, and also as a practitioner, as a judge. And before I joined the judiciary, I was Deputy Secretary General of Ministry of Justice, so this is where my administrative experience comes from. But a part of that, of course, the highlights have been different events that I have been also lucky to participate or to organize or to give some impetus to. And I remember at the Ministry of Justice, we also prepared with the working group, or I was part of the co-authors of Estonian constitutional amendments before Estonia joined the European Union in 2004. And these constitutional amendments were necessary to join Estonia based on rule of law and legal principles. And I was very moved when on September 2003, by popular vote, by referendum, the people with vast majority accepted these modifications, accepted these constitutional modifications, the text that I have been working on, and that it somehow contributed to the history of my country and my country to become part of Europe again. And from there on, I created Estonian Society for European Law, and in 2012, this society organized international conference of European law. It's called FIDE Congress, Fédération Internationale de Droit Européen, in Tallinn. And Tallinn became a capital of European law at that time. And it was then when I met Dr. Wolfgang Heusel, Anno Domini, the director of ERA, and also Laviero Buono, a lawyer, a criminal law expert from ERA. And already 2 years before that, I had met Joanna Kuchai from ERA, who we talked to when I prepared our presidency, next presidency in Estonia, and we were preparing that in Madrid in 2010 in FIDE. So this FIDE was one of the highlights because it was very complicated to prepare it. I was first female president of this organization, exploring this to the Eastern Europe, so breaking all the rules that they had so far, also introducing a conference for young people, because young lawyers who start with their work, they do not necessarily have the means to attend and to pay the rather high fees of this congress themselves. So we arranged them the opportunity to meet some of the VIPs, so to say, the experts who were coming lecturing to Estonia. And it has now become tradition, even in FIDE. And they have also used the title of my article as a slogan, so to say, to next FIDE congresses, which is called Uniting Great Minds of European Law. And this is definitely, these moments are where you feel that you have contributed to something that is extraordinary, that it takes place, and this exchange of experts on this very high level. And I'm also proud of my achievements, that I've been elected to Scientific Committee of Fundamental Rights Agency, for example, or the Article 255 panel, which is in charge of the Treaty on the Functioning of European Union, which is in charge of appointments or giving advice as to the appointments of judges and advocate generals at the so-called Luxembourg Court. So you see, all this work has somehow been related to science, research, training, developing ideas around European law and meeting people in this field of European law.
In 2013, you were elected European of the Year by the Estonian European Movement. What does this mean to you?
Oh, it's of course a great responsibility. I've had already a decoration from Estonia and also Ordre National de Mérite from France for the dictionary that we wrote together with my husband, the French-Estonian French legal dictionary. But of course, this award has a supranational flavor, and it reminded me on Gustav Suits, an Estonian author, who back in 1905, Estonia was not yet even independent for the first time, created together with other writers a movement, Young Estonians, and he said that let us be Estonians, but also become Europeans. And I think this is what it is. Europe is my home. Europe was there and will be there always. It has, to a certain extent, to me, lost a little bit of its passion, and now it's of course very different context to talk about it. In any case, that it used to have back in 1990s, when we were also eager to rebuild this common Europe, all corners and parts of Europe, and to re-establish that. But I think it's very enriching to have this multicultural background and diversity, and to gather together people, as Jean Monnet said, not necessarily only the states, but the people who are living in these states, and to give them hope and confidence that there will be at least peace for a long time, hopefully, in Europe.
So you were the youngest Supreme Court judge in Estonia. What did you learn from your experience?
I learned how to share my ideas with colleagues who had many experience, and I, on the other hand, had knowledge of European law that they did not necessarily acquire at the time when they studied law. And it was a very interesting mixture and very balancing one. And also I learned from A to Z to write my own judgments and to motivate my own judgments, how important it is to well reason the judgment, even if everybody not necessarily agrees with the judgment, but if the judgment is well reasoned, it is easier to accept it. And I also learned this independent thinking, this free spirit, this seeing the forest beyond the trees, and how to interpret in a teleological way, which is very important for a judge, and also particularly for an international judge, which I then became later on at the European Court of Human Rights. And I was also always happy to train judges, and even very moving moment again, or one of the highlights again in my life, was when I received an award from Estonian judges for my training courses about recent developments in European Court of Human Rights case law. And of course, I was not only the youngest judge, but I was also the first judge who took maternity leave at the Supreme Court in Estonia. And perhaps the only thing was that we were so few of us at the time, only 3 ladies from out of 19 justices.
Tell us about your presidency of the CCJE and receiving the Justice in World Foundation, which has been compared to the Nobel Prize in Law.
Well, in that respect, one should perhaps start with how important it is to have independent and impartial judges and courts. And it's not a privilege for the judges, but it is something for the good of the people seeking justice, to have access to justice, to have access to independent and impartial courts with fair trial. I was once expert of Council of Europe at Abu Dhabi, and they were very keen to learn about the judicial administration and the way how to make the judicial system more efficient. And they were making some progress in appointing first female directors to the court and even changing the conditions to become a judge, that you do not longer need to be only a man to become a judge. But as soon as I mentioned the 2 words independent judiciary, there was a silence. And indeed, to paraphrase Lord Alexander of Whedon, it's without this democracy, you cannot have these independent judges. But without independent judges, you can, on the other hand, also not have true functioning democracy and rule of law. And this is what this Council of European Judges of the Council of Europe, CCJE, is all about. It's a very unique body, advisory body, that was a remarkable invention of Council of Europe. In 2000 it was created, and the first president of this body was Lord Jonathan Mans from the House of Lords and later from the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, succeeded by a French Court of Cassation judge Alain Lacabaraz, who was in his turn followed by a judge from Italy, Raffaele Sabato. And then I had the honor to step in and was elected by my peers as a president of this advisory body comprising of 47 judges from all over the Council of Europe member states. And we drafted opinions on the judicial independence, but also on, for example, relations between media and justice, on the quality of judicial decisions, and we adopted, together with prosecutors, a joint declaration on the role of judges and prosecutors. We also monitored, to a certain extent, member states who turned to us who could have problems with the judicial independence, and we organized lectures and conferences about judicial independence and fair trial in different member states in Europe. And then in 2009, and it was a foundation which is based in Madrid, but which has roots to the International Judges Association, decided to award this Consultative Council of European Judges with this beautiful award and very reputable award, Justice in the World. And the ceremony took place in November 2009 in Madrid with the local representatives and president of the Madrid Commune, and with Philippe Boyard from the Council of Europe Human Rights Department, chair of this department, and myself. And it was said to give to the organization who is promoting judicial independence, but not only about this among the judges themselves, but also to the people and to the society. And indeed, myself also personally, I found it very important not only to write articles in scientific journals or legal journals, but also in a more simple way to the people about what are their rights and how can they appeal to the courts and ask for justice. And what happened is very interesting and in a way also sad story with this award was that then it was put on a show on one of the Council of Europe buildings in Strasbourg, Agora building, just next to the door. So when my sons visited this building, they always were very proud to see that this statue was there. And one day it was no longer there. And I asked what happened, and it happened that demonstrators came to the building and they took the statue in order to break the door to the lobby. And the statue was apparently still somehow rescued and repaired, but now it's no longer available to see everybody, to greet everybody right in the entrance, but it is in the main building of the Council of Europe behind a glass wall. But I certainly hope that this will not be the case of independence and impartiality of judiciary. And this experience from the CCJE is a very valuable one because it also created, again, a lot of network with colleagues from different states who think alike and who have the same problems and same challenges and also same achievements. And I'm happy that this body is still functioning very well, and it has, as I said, unfortunately, still a lot of work.
Can you tell us more about your decision to switch from working as a judge to operational management?
Well, I already mentioned the importance of education. I feel like ERA is a wonderful institution, and I'm honored if I can somehow contribute to this and help with my contacts that I have made in my professional life previously, and also combine this academic, practical judging, but also some managerial and event organizing skills, and also this international flair. It's there. It's of course very, very attractive. And I think, as I said, ERA is a very well-functioning institution which has a remarkable management and excellent people and open mind to invite somebody from outside with an outside perspective and with a little bit feminine touch also to the management.
So what lessons will you bring from your experience at the European Court of Human Rights?
The European Court of Human Rights, this is a chapter on its own. It is rightly called a conscience of Europe. It has a huge responsibility and enormous challenge. It is open for more than 800 people from the European continent to Vladivostok to Lisbon. And it had around 160,000 cases, applications pending before the court when I joined the court in 2011. And by the time the end of my non-renewable mandate, it was about 60,000. And of course, it was a challenge to, on the one hand, maintain the quality and on the other hand, the efficiency, and to find different working methods and structures and possibilities how to adapt to the workflow, but at the same time produce very important judgment. And it's incredible how modest and how human actually this institution is, despite the huge task and the authority that it has and the reputation that it has. And the lawyers were always very nice and very well working and competent. And it was a pleasure to work in this institution. It was a pleasure to see it also not only as a law, but as a part of culture, as a part of way of thinking, a lifestyle, a bigger picture, global picture. It learned me really to see things again from a very global picture, and also to teach me to understand the differences in systems, and to try to find compromises and solutions, and also solutions that could be carried out in practice, that would not stay only or remain only abstract. And I had to deal with everything, starting of course with judgments and important grand chamber judgments, but also, as I said, about working methods, about chairing the annual seminar, which gathered together all presidents of the Supreme Courts and Constitutional Courts of Council of Europe member states, and even taking care, if need be, that my lawyers would have a warm office. So, and at the end, I also created a little theatre club at the European Court of Human Rights to make a bridge between the creativity and the human rights, which is, of course, this creativity or this link is there anyway, but you have to just a little bit find it out.
Whilst you're still very new to your role, what plans or aspirations do you have for your role as Programme Director of ERA?
Well, every person is unique, every place is unique. You take with you all the experience and skills you have obtained from your different paths, but you also are flexible to adapt. I'm very happy, as I said, that I've conducted all these personal meetings with people, and I know more or less now where ERA stands. And I would like to be the face, the Visitkarte also of ERA. All the people working here are a sort of a Visitkarte of ERA, face of ERA. And we have such different faces, and it would be interesting to somehow use this as a Dach academy, a roof academy for little small academies, be it Academy for European Charter of Fundamental Rights, or Academy for Court Staff Training, or Academy for Private International Law and Business Law, of Criminal Law, of Environmental and Food Law, Data Protection Law, Competition Law, and so on, and European Academy of Rule of Law. So there are plenty of ideas. I'm full of motivation, and I think that it's also important to find a balance, and I would like us to go to some place, some green, to picnic, and to brainstorm together out of the context, to think out of the box, what is and what will be the future of ERA and the mission of ERA, and how can we best shape it in this contemporary world that we are living, so that we can always continue to upgrade our and others' European legal expertise.